Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 28th of February 2025, and this is part three of the short series, part four or four-part series, should we say. So this is part three. I'm going to keep it quick. Again, I'll apologize for the slides that I'm going to put up. It's boring as fuck, but I'm going to change it after this short series. Apologies for the delays with the content, but to be quite frank, there's just been so many events, I suppose, happening right now, with lots of twists and turns, just to mix things up and keep everybody on their toes. And I'm just trying to filter out and lock down the real news. I'm trying not to say the man's name, but putting Trump aside, let's look at what's really going on. And I want to try and keep this short because we, as in you and I, need to be looking at the whole shit storm that's unfolding in front of our eyes at the moment. I've probably had this channel going now for 6 months. I started with 20 videos, but the initial reason for me kicking this off, that being the invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. I also wanted to keep some kind of sort of prepping content out there for starters. But my sole reason, for being interested in this whole thing from the start really started sort of 1100 days ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. And I remember watching those tanks and that sort of artillery equipment and soldiers rolling across the border into Ukraine. And I knew from that point on that we, as in Europeans, have got a problem. With the Ukraine being on our doorsteps and Russia invading Ukraine now for the second time in 10 years, I knew this was going to be very different. And I couldn't have been any closer to the truth, to be honest. If you don't know me, I do not like politics because they're constantly lying to their populations. And quite frankly, I can see why. The government have to ensure that they're keeping at least 85% of its population in check, as it were, in order and in the palms of their hands. The government, without that, 85% of people are fucked, meaning they need to ensure that 85% of people are working and they're paying tax. Tax being the ultimate word here, because as long as there's 85% of the population, certainly for this country, paying into the pot, then the engine keeps running. Now, with the poor and pathetic recent governments seen running this country, and I'm talking about the UK over the last 10 years, they have started to lose control. There are now 21.6% of 16 to 40, no, 16 to 64-year-olds here in the UK deemed unfit or economically inactive to work. And that, ladies and gents, is a problem. That's 11 million people, I believe, here in the UK that should be helping to keep the engine running and are not. So instead, we, the taxpayer, are paying for them to do whatever it is they're doing. The UK government receives approximately 1.1 trillion, or they receive 1.1 trillion each year from taxpayers' receipts. Last year, 284 billion of that was paid out to people on benefits. That is a quarter of the main pot, or that main pot. And we've now got 21.6% of 16 to 64-year-olds inactive, leaving or bringing that down to 78.4%, meaning the numbers are no longer in favour for the government. I still think that the odd pandemic and the war, or a war, are methods of sort of controlling these numbers. Not just here in the UK, but I think this is just happening across the world. I think it's just that's how governments operate. I've okay, this is my take, right? So if you've watched any of my videos or previous videos, you'll also know my take on the immigration issues seen here in the UK. Actually, not just here, to be honest, but in other parts of the world or in other places around the world. Let me just put, this single point to all of you. Slavery has existed for thousands of years, predating written records, and it can be tracked back to as long or as far back as 11,000 years ago. So humans, they have been and they continue to be a commodity. We've got human trafficking happening as we speak, and the government's interpretation of today's version of slavery is immigration. Whether you want to accept that or not, I'm not fussed. I'm just trying to wake some of the people up out there. We're walking, we've got people walking through their lives with bubbles on their heads. They've got no idea what's going on, and what's gone on, and more importantly, the reasons why we see all of this shit happening around us each day. I'm going to be frank with anyone watching this video right now. The government don't give a shit about you, so you need to get that idea out of your head. And why should they? They're providing you with a system that allows you and your families to function. Education in terms of schools, colleges, universities, because of course they need to teach you how to become a member of the system. Healthcare for anyone that becomes ill, even if you have to sit on an NHS waiting list with the other sort of 7.2 million people. And then, of course, there's all the other cogs in the engine that allow us to function or allow it to function, whether that be law enforcement, the armed forces, or any of the other sort of services that they provide. There is one thing clear here in the UK, though, that all of those services are broken or breaking. However, the government are merely management. They're here to try and manage the system to ensure that the engine keeps running. With that in mind, though, you should now be able to see, you should be able to see more clearly, okay, in that if and when the shit hits the fan, whether you believe that's likely to happen, and if it does, whether that's going to affect you or not, then be prepared to look after yourself, because there's one thing that's crystal clear right now. If the government can't look after its people now, and when I say that with, the cracks that are appearing all over the place, then what chance well, do we have, you and I have, if we're in a wartime scenario? And this is why, ladies and gents, you seriously have to start thinking about preparing for some shitty times ahead. You need to be preparing for one day turning on the taps in your house and there's no water. You need to be prepared for the shelves in the supermarkets to be cleared rapidly, and in other cases, looting possibly. You need to be prepared on what you're going to do if you need to protect your family. What are your plans if a tactical nuke takes out a military base 50 miles away down the road? But before we even get there, you need to start making yourself aware of the signs and signals being presented to each and every one of us every single day at the moment. So if any of you are sort of watching either videos online, following the mainstream news or whatever bullshit's going off on social media, some of it the first question you need to ask yourself is that they're talking about this, guys. They're no longer drip feeding the nations with this information. They are telling you, that the shit's about to hit the fan. For this piece, I'm talking about the UK because that's where I am. That's where I live. Look at the changes happening around you. So there's subtle changes depending on what they are, but they're significant. First and foremost, employment. So job losses and companies going into administration. So the economy is a good start to start looking. And ask yourselves this question, ladies and gents. If you lose your job today, how certain are you that you could sort of get another job? That obviously depends on what you do for a living. I worked only 4 months last year and I've just finished a new contract, which I started in September of last year. I finished that this week. I have worked in IT for 25 years and I thought that this trade would be safe, or very, very safe, or safer than ever, to be honest with you. But how wrong could I have been? I'm now out of work again, like last year, and I'll now have to move into a job just to make sure that we've got food on the table and the bills are paid. We can't even think about those holidays and all those luxuries that we've kind of not luxuries, but the things that many families have been sort of used to, because things are changing, and it's not apparent. It's apparent to it's right. If you lose your job tomorrow, are you going to turn around and say it's either because you're no good at your job, Or is it because, well, okay, let's put it this way. You're being made redundant. Why is the company making you redundant? Is it because they're not doing too well? Could be the case. It probably is the case. So, what industry does your company work in? You know, you have to look at what's happening around you. Why is or are these companies folding? Why are they going into administration? Why are they cutting back? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? It's because the economies are changing. And let me just put this to you, ladies and gents, for the UK and probably many countries across Europe, they are on a war footing. And with that, it means that funds are certainly government funds are going to be allocated for the war machine. And companies, depending on who they trade with, they could be trading with companies in countries across Europe that they've gone into administration and therefore you go into administration. So it's a rippling effect. What I'm trying to say here, guys, is just look at these changes, okay? And when it becomes difficult to re-establish yourself, just ask yourself the questions, why? Why is this a struggle now? Why is the economy struggling? Why can't I go and get the job that I would expect or I've been used to getting for the last 25 years? There's listen, there's plenty of talk now online about how the UK is just narrowly well, it's escaped a recession. But predictions for 2025 are pointing towards the UK and other countries actually across Europe going into a recession. I've seen this at the beginning of last year. Okay, in fact, probably before that, I wasn't taking note during 2022 because I was focusing on the invasion of Ukraine. But once it started impacting me in 2023, 2020, well, 2024, once it started impacting me, and when I say impacting me, it's impacting me in terms of not worked and I work in IT. So if that industry is taking a hit, then there's a problem. Um, you know, they're saying that the UK economy is falling apart. You know, lower GDP growth anticipated, and all of the back of the stagnant 2024. They mentioned the weakening consumer confidence, and that will be the cost of living, price hikes across many industries still now for products and services. And I'm going to tell you guys, it's going to get worse. And quite frankly, the list just goes on. But what they're not really telling us is the real reasons why all of this is happening in the first place. And to be fair, you know, they can't because the news would cause panic and mass disruption. So it's just drip feeding. That's it. The New World War started back in February 2022. It's as simple as that. But that's just my view, guys. Okay, don't go running off and don't, don't panic. You know, what I'm trying to say is this is what I believe. And that is the reason why economies are falling apart. Central governments, or certainly central government here in the UK, will reduce allocated budgets to its local councils. Well, we've seen that. We've seen some councils or boroughs going into administration in the UK. And budgets will be, accompanied with advice and instructions on how to prepare for war in those local areas. So what I'm trying to say is that central government will be having conversations with its councils about the country being on a war footing and what that means to them in terms of their duties and responsibilities to the local people. If you've recently sort of lost your job and you're finding it difficult to find another one, if you're hearing from friends or colleagues and families that they too are being made redundant, or they're having to either reapply for their positions with lower annual salaries, self-employed individuals not finding any work, or companies thinking about going into administration due to no new contracts coming in, people around you are having to cut back on those luxuries that they've been used to having. And I could go on. So listen, guys, if you're not experiencing any of this or hearing, any of it from any others or people around you, then just forget that. Just forget that I'm even going on about it. Just be mindful though that if everything's okay for you at the moment, just be mindful that that could happen or that could happen. That could change it in a split second. Okay. I think we're at a stage now whereby the governments, the mainstream, can no longer hide the severity of what's going on. But to be honest with you, I think the government have always known, I don't think they have always known, of course they have, about what's coming. Rishi Sunak stated last year that the UK was on a war footing. They mentioned national service last year. So that seed has been sown. There are countries right across Europe preparing for war and distributing booklets out to their populations, telling them, as in the people, you and I, but in other countries, to prepare for war. There are military bases being built all over Europe and have been since 2022. The whole transport infrastructure across Europe being upgraded to allow the movement of military assets being shipped to the front lines. And now we have emergency meetings being arranged and conducted by leaders from all over Europe. There was one yesterday. I will cover that in another video. If that's not a sign that matters, then listen, guys. If that's not a sign, then I don't know what is. To be honest with you. See, it's a lot easier for me because I've been tracking the Ukraine war now for 1100 days. I've made sure that I've tracked this war every single day, even to the extreme of watching numerous Telegram channels providing coverage on the front lines. Yes, that means watching soldiers, sort of laying in the road, burning to death. Soldiers putting their own rifle barrels into their mouths and pulling the triggers to, just simply avoid capture, torture, or even being blown up by drones. I've seen Russian soldiers torturing and killing their own comrades for not doing as they're told, and the men dragging themselves into and out of trenches with no legs and just body parts hanging off of their torsos. Some might say, you sick fuck. But for me, this is a process of desensitizing myself and actually understanding what the fuck is going on and what real war is about. Because that, ladies and gents, you will not see anywhere on mainstream social media or any newspapers. But then, what do I know? I'm like you. I don't work in government, thank fuck, nor any sort of intelligence services, and I no longer, sort of serve for the armed forces. And when I was there, I didn't see any combat anyway. So, with that, it's taken me many, many hours, days, weeks, and months going through the mountains of bullshit online. And you become a master after so long. All of that misinformation and the government sort of politics is a massive distraction as well, of which there is a lot of it. So just try and avoid it if you can, like the plague. As I finish off, my point is I, like many others, are now trying to ascertain where we are. Now Trump has come into the mix and decided to throw his boot about the development, manufacturing, and imports and exports of arms and military assets around the world are just going to go through the roof now. You've just got to look at the share prices of some of these large companies, these defense and military companies. The US sticking its boot into or up, shall we say, NATO's arse, and telling them to commit financially to defense is a good thing. With the US being the world's sort of largest exporter of military arms, this announcement is good for American business, of course. And then there's the UK being the second, well, they're the second biggest exporter of arms, with France not too far behind. Hence the reason why the UK and France will bridge the gap between the US and the rest of NATO. America isn't leaving NATO, that's for sure, because there's absolutely no strategic advantage for them, that is. Um, Completely losing a foothold in Europe is not going to be good for the US if they want to ensure global dominance and security. So don't listen to half of that shit, people. There's the stuff that people are talking about out there at the moment. It's just it's madness. NATO right now are playing a game, presenting some kind of alliance for fallout. I believe my next video will explain my theory around that. But anyway, I've gone on for too long. This was going to be a short video. This is part three of four parts. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to get some more content together and just finish off that final part. The small Trump series, shall we call it? So listen, ladies and gents, just keep yourselves military fit, infantry aware, and I'll be back for part four shortly.